Alien Romulus is a 2024 movie about 5 college kids that want to break into a spooky mad scientist laboratory in order to steal some equipment, only to unleash the hidden creatures inside. Now, I'm sure this is not shattering to any minds out there, but I am a huge fan of the Alien series. Although, I don't know if that is really true anymore. Alien might be one of my favorite movies of all time. Aliens is just as good for different reasons. And although Alien 3 couldn't quite stand up to the first two, it took some very interesting turns and had some excellent moments and a good overall film. And quite frankly, given the amount of turmoil that movie went through from pre-production all the way to finishing, it's kind of amazing it turned out to be as good as it did. Of course, after that is where things get a little dicey. Alien Resurrection was poorly conceived as the perfect example of choosing just the wrong writer and wrong director for a film. Prometheus can just go fuck itself, and Covenant was just so blah. I literally can't remember a single thing about that film. And now we have this silly movie. So I guess not counting the AVP movies, I liked 3 out of 7 of the Alien movies. I mean, it's a great batting average, I guess, but hard to say I'm a quote-unquote fan of the franchise anymore. Now, to be clear, this is not an overall bad film. There are a lot of things that I thought it did really well. First and foremost is the look and feel of this film is fantastic. This is the first movie since Alien 3 that I thought it really nailed the look of this universe, very similar to the first movie Alien, which is surprising given that Ridley Scott did the last 2 movies. This movie felt so dirty and tactile. Everything looked right out of the original film. The set design and just overall production design was nothing short of amazing. Also, its use of practical effects and physical sets was such a breath of fresh air. I cannot praise this movie enough for those things. The lighting, the camera work, and just the return of giving these creatures such weight and danger, I think was such a huge accomplishment. And so I just have to give it massive props for that. Also, the setup of this story works pretty well. This group of people have a limited time window to break into an outpost before it burns up, to steal some equipment they need, during which they accidentally let loose a bunch of monsters. Now, that's not necessarily a bad framework for the story. You've got a creepy location, a direct threat, a larger conspiracy, and a ticking clock. The first part of this movie I was actually enjoying. Where things start tipping into the uh-oh category for me is when the bulk of the story is executed, the bland characters that are doing it, and the near constant callbacks, Easter eggs, member berries, nostalgia, whatever the fuck you want to call it, gets out of control. The movie opens up with the wreckage of the Nostromo and a mysterious group acquiring the alien that Ripley had blown out of the airlock in the first movie. We then move to our main character, Rain, who lives on a mining colony with no one but her android brother, Andy. She is once again denied to leave the planet and take a job on another system for some reason. Now, this takes place about 20 years or so after the events of the first film. And I have to say, this felt a little bit off to me in this world. I know Weyland Yutani has always been villains in these movies, mostly referred to as the company. But they always just came off to me as a typical uncaring corporation. In this, it sets them up as a new version of the Dutch West India Company, where it seems their practices are almost comically evil, sending people to die in mines without health care, and the people working for them are in some kind of an indentured servitude. I mean, it's not a major issue because it's really just background world building, but I just wanted to mention it because it stuck out to me a little bit. Anyway, Rain gets recruited by a group of friends who decided to break their contract and get off-world and travel to another planet. At the same time, they discovered a derelict vessel that has recently entered orbit, and because the journey to this other planet takes 9 years, they need cryochambers. And they believe that this vessel has them. So what they want to do is they want to fly up there, break in, steal the cryo chambers, and head to the other planet. But they need Rain's android brother, Andy, in order to get by the security, because Andy is built by Weyland-Yutani and has ability to access their security system. Now, it's during this meeting that we're introduced to all the characters in the film. Although I use the term characters a little loosely. To say these characters are thin is insulting to thin characters. Like, let's see, you have Asshole Dude 1, you've got Asshole Dude 2, Pilot Woman, Pregnant Woman, and then Woman with Android, which is Rain, and Android, which is Andy. Now, I'm not really being funny. I literally could not tell you any more about these characters beyond that. Like, with the exception of the woman who is the pilot, none of them have really any special skills or reason for being there except that they're all just friends. And actually, considering how later in the movie autopilot becomes used a lot, I even wonder why they needed the pilot in the first place. Now, one of the things that I love about the first three Alien movies, and yes, of course, is the creatures and the tension, the effects and the action, the carnage, those are all great things. But the characters are memorable, whether it's space truckers in Alien, or Marines in Aliens, or inmates in Alien 3. They were all unique characters that felt different and interesting. In this, every character is basically the same. They all have one of three settings: goofing off, asshole mode, or just straight panic. At any time during this movie, you could swap out any character for another, and it makes no difference at all to the scene. Now, I joked about the synopsis at the top with the college kids in the mad scientist lab, but these characters really feel more at home in a generic haunted house horror movie than they do here. Like, this feels like the original script was that, and then they just slapped an alien coat of paint on it and then threw in a bunch of Alien references to boot. Oh, and there are references. Oh boy. The sheer volume of callbacks to previous movies is so numerous. It feels like this entire movie was designed just for member berries and nostalgia. And it didn't stop at the first two movies. Oh no, this is an equal opportunity member berry movie. And I have to say, I would love to institute a rule for any movie that's part of a franchise. You get one Easter egg callback, member berry, nostalgia, whatever you want to call it. Just fucking one. Give your nod to the audience so everyone can have a little bit of a chuckle or a fist bump or whatever, but then move on. I wish this was actually possible to do, because this movie had so many. Now, I'll talk about some of those callbacks in the spoiler section, because I can't really mention some of them without hitting spoilers. Now, the other thing I thought that really bogged this movie down was just the purely dumb choices both the characters made and the choices that the production made during this film. Now, I'm not going to get too far into the plot of this story, because I think you can guess how this goes. They get to the vessel, which turns out to be an outpost, and wakens the aliens on board, and then it's a race against time to get what they need and get out before the place goes up.
You want to break in and steal highly regulated equipment.
Now, from a pacing standpoint, I will say it doesn't drag at all for being 2 hours long, but some of the plotting here feels a little tedious, with extra quests that they have to do as more obstacles come up. It almost feels more like a video game than a movie of them having to go all around the outpost for various reasons. Now, to go any further, unfortunately, I have to kind of get into spoilers, so I can talk about some of the more specific decisions in this film and why I had a problem with it. So if you don't want to hear this, skip ahead to the summation at the end. Okay, so this is just going to be littered with things that bothered me about this film. So the crew gets into orbit, and they're surprised to discover that the vessel that they tracked from the planet is an actual outpost that somehow got dragged into their orbit. So hang on a second. So they knew that it was a Weyland-Yutani vessel in orbit, hence why they needed Andy, and they knew that it had cryo chambers in order to steal, but they couldn't tell the difference between a vessel and an outpost? Also, no one else on the planet seems to have noticed this gigantic outpost drifting into orbit. How is that possible? And lastly, how the hell did this outpost get here? Presumably it was somewhere else and just drifted here in some way. And if this is indeed an outpost as seemingly as important as this lets on, how the hell did the company not realize it had become derelict and not send someone out to investigate why it's dark? Anyway, they get on board the outpost and locate the cryo chambers, but they realize that they need fuel for them, which is on another deck. So at this point, they decide to power up the entire station so that it'll be easier to get to. However, for some reason, just by simply powering up the station, it immediately thaws all of the facehuggers that are in stasis as well. Now, these weren't just frozen because the temperature went down when the power went out. They were all in like these little personal chambers for safekeeping. But I guess on this outpost, there is this weird directive that if the station powers up, it must also wake up all the creatures that it has in storage. I mean, that seems like a bad plan to house dangerous organisms if they can just get thawed out and be free without any real security measures. But of course they do, and they all wake up, and I don't know how many, I think it's like 50 facehuggers or something like that, and they start getting chased around, one of them jumping on the pilot. Now, in the original Alien, best as I can figure, it took hours, possibly even a day, from the time that the facehugger fell off of Kane until it burst out of him. In Aliens, the only time we really see a chest burster was in the trapped colonist who was still alive when the Marines showed up, so that might have been at least several days or a couple days maybe. And in Alien 3, it was days or weeks before the Queen burst out of Ripley. I mean, granted, that last one was aided by Charles Dance's Little Cocktails, but still, that was a while. In this movie, it took exactly 5 minutes. 5 minutes before that thing came through her chest. Like, she got the facehugger off, and by the time she got back to the ship, it was already busting out of her. That is fast. And don't give me some shit that these were genetically modified facehuggers. I mean, that was really fast. Anyway, during the panic of all of this, pregnant woman, pilot, and asshole dude number 2, or maybe it was asshole dude number 1, I can't really remember, they had literally the same character. Try to take off in the shuttle, leaving the others behind, but instead they crash the shuttle into a different part of the station. So now the crew on the outpost has to travel across it in order to get to the ship, in order to escape before the outpost crashes into the rings of whatever planet they're on. Now, in order to do that, Andy, Rain, and asshole dude number 1 have to cross an area that is now full of facehuggers. Andy tells them that these things hunt by temperature, so they can detect a body temperature, and that's how they sort of hone onto you. So Rain has the idea of raising the room temperature to 98.6 so that they'll be invisible. The funny thing is, Andy warns them not to get stressed out as your temperature might spike. My first thought was, if you can set the room temperature, why not just set it to be like at 100 or 105 just to be sure? I mean, humans can certainly withstand that heat, and it would cover any tiny spikes in body temperature. But no, they go with exactly 98.6. So that means they have to be quote-unquote stress-free as they're walking through the facehugger room. Although it almost kind of doesn't matter because they only get like 3 steps into the room, and then asshole dude 1 stops and has a full-on conversation with someone on a headset for a while until the facehuggers hear him, and then they just have to run anyway. Also, I love how they can all outrun the facehuggers down the hallway. And I call super bullshit on that. Like, humans are the slowest mammal on Earth. Like, almost everything is faster than us. But whatever, somehow they all make it to the doorway before the facehuggers, and it's all fine. Now, the other thing I was so shocked at was seemingly how tone deaf this movie was and how blatant the Member Berries tonic used was. Like, they decide to hook up the chief science officer on board, which is an android, to find out more information about what's going on. And they hook up a severed at the waist officer named Rook and turn him on. And lo and behold, it's Ian Holm, the original Ash from Alien. But not just Ian Holm, digital Ian Holm. And good lord, did he look bad. Now I'm going to get into this with a little bit more detail when I talk about all the nostalgia bait stuff towards the end. But man, this looked terrible. It wasn't even good enough to hit the uncanny valley, for Christ's sakes. Anyway, Ash, or Rook, or whatever the hell his name is, lead them to a central command area where they find the black goo from Prometheus and Covenant, and they are able to get guns. However, they're told that they can't use the guns because they're on the lowest deck, and if any acid spills onto the floor, it'll rupture the hull. Then they ask, well, why take them then? And the answer is for intimidation, a bluff. Oh my god. When have alien soldiers been intimidated by weapons ever? In Aliens, which happens 37 years after this movie, mind you, hundreds get wasted and then just keep coming. But somehow these ones are cautious aliens. And don't give me the Ripley scene with the Queen where she threatens the eggs and the soldiers back off. That was the Queen's doing, not the soldiers. Anyway, aliens do come, and Rain and Pregnant Woman get onto an elevator, but unfortunately Andy gets injured and left behind. But Rain decides that she's gonna stop the elevator and go back for him, despite the fact that she had fully planned on ditching Andy once they got to the new planet because the new planet does not allow androids. And Andy was upgraded when they arrived at the outpost and had put them through harm's way several times. So her decision to sort of go into the lion's den to try and save Andy is just really, really questionable. But she does. She climbs down to save Andy, and while they're going back to the elevator, they're beset on by a bunch of aliens. But of course, she can't shoot them because of the acid. So she has this great idea to shut off gravity and then shoot them, because if there's no gravity, the acid won't fall on the floor. So she goes ahead and shoots all of the aliens, and the acid just kind of floats there. The unfortunate thing is that's not really how fluid dynamics works. Like, no gravity doesn't mean everything just suspends. It just means it continues to move from a high pressure to a low pressure, and gravity doesn't affect it. So shooting an alien creates the high pressure of it squirting out, and it will still continue to move in the direction until something stops it. Yeah, air pressure will slow it down a little bit, but with the speed of the bullet and the force that it hits, combined with the creature's internal system pumping out the acid or the blood, I doubt it would just exit their body and then just sit there. Like, okay, it makes sense that it may not all hit the floor, but it still might, but also hit everywhere. But I guess that's better than all of it hitting the floor? I don't know. But that also has the benefit of leading to the next sequence, which I thought might have been the dumbest thing I've ever seen, where she has to float around and dodge all the acid puddles that are floating in the air in order to get down the hallway, which is the most video game thing I think I have ever seen in a movie. It's just so ridiculous. Whatever. Anyway, Rain and Andy decide to take off up the elevator shaft in 0G, but gravity turns on before they can get there, and Rain drops down the shaft. But luckily, an alien saves her with his tail. Now, this seems a little crazy to me that the alien would save her as she's falling down the shaft, but I could see, like, all right, they need more hosts for facehuggers. That makes sense. I'll buy that. But in this case, does the alien immediately take her down to the bottom and cocoon her? No, instead it sits there and just sort of hisses in her face, like the scene in Alien 3. So which is it? Are they smart enough to avoid guns and to catch her and cocoon her, or do they just want to kill her? Because this one didn't seem to want to do either. It just always bothers me, I mean, in any movie, really, any movie at all, where creatures act one way when the supporting characters are on screen, and then another when it's the main character. Just that awful plot armor rearing its ugly head. It just always bothers me. Meanwhile, the pregnant woman gets into the shuttle, and because she's bleeding badly, she decides to take the black ooze drug as opposed to trying to seek real medical attention and trying to stop the flow of blood. So that's convenient, I guess. But fortunately, everyone is able to get back to the shuttle, and they're able to take off using autopilot. Andy switches sides again and doesn't listen to Ash/Rook anymore, and now they get to have their calm moment, right? Everybody gets in their underwear and they get ready for cryosleep. But of course, the black goo strikes again, speeding up pregnant woman's birth, which ends up being a hybrid human engineer baby from Prometheus. I just hate this creature. I hate the engineer creature. I always did. This is no better. It's just so goofy and ridiculous looking. Of course, if you didn't have the engineer, we wouldn't have the scene where Rain has to go into a locker and suit up into a spacesuit. Where have we seen that before? Then, of course, Rain has this incredibly convoluted process for her to uncouple the storage bay and drop it out into space with the alien engineer human hybrid baby in it. I mean, just thankfully, the engineer creature just kind of slowly walks towards her the whole time, allowing her to get all this stuff done. All right, so now let's talk about the nostalgia member berries callback nonsense. Now for this, I'm just going to kind of go through in a rapid fire of all the dumb fucking things I noticed that were callbacks and references to the other movies. And I'm sure there are more and I just missed them, but these are the ones that kind of stuck out to me. Now, right from the top, they get the original alien out of the Nostromo debris, but honestly, that's not bad. I wouldn't even count that to their one that they're allowed, because that is actually part of the story. So, okay, there's the quote, "I prefer artificial person."
I prefer the term artificial person myself.
Now here I thought that was an intriguing line from Bishop in Aliens because it was a way for him to show his humanity and how his model is different from Ash the android from the first movie. But no, I guess that's just part of their programming now. The electric cattle prod device, that was something that I thought Brett just made with cobbled together parts on the Nostromo, but I guess that's just standard issue alien wrangling gear. Reactivating a cut-in-half android. Fucking Ash, aka Rook. Now I have two huge problems here. One from an in-world perspective, which is when Ash joined the crew of the Nostromo and Alien, he was a late replacement and no one knew who he was. But they didn't really think he was an android. So it would stand to reason that if you're trying to infiltrate a vessel with androids, you wouldn't just make them all look the same like an assembly line. Andy looks different, as did Bishop. So why are there other Ash models? Also, everyone knows Ash is evil. So by using the same model, you remove any question as to whether or not this android is really helping them or is just helping himself. Now, the second reason why I hated this idea is more from a larger perspective. Ian Holm died in 2020. So this feels particularly egregious to have him dug up and displayed on screen like this. I mean, it's not like he signed on to this movie and then died mid-production. This was a choice the studio made. Granted, I heard that they did get permission from Ian Holm's estate in order to do this, but it still feels ghoulish and unnecessary. Not to mention it was such a stark contrast to how well the practical effects were throughout this film to then take a giant shit whenever this CGI monstrosity comes onto the screen. Like, why not follow the practical trend that you've already set and have just a new actor play Rook so you can use that actual person? Rook waking up and saying perfect organism just randomly. Oh, how about the quote, "I can't lie to you about your chances, but you have my sympathies." At that point, you've already dug up the carcass and made him dance like a puppet. Might as well steal lines from the original movie too. Oh, pulse rifles. Remember those? Also remember that this is 37 years before Aliens, and yet this gun, with its auto-aim capability, seems to be way more advanced than what they have in Aliens by the Marines.
Get away from her, you bitch!
This can fuck all the way off. Also, why would Andy think this alien is a female? And side note, given that this movie takes place before Aliens, was Ripley stealing Andy's line? Ooh. Shutting an elevator door as an alien is closing in, climbing a ladder while air is rushing out into space, getting into a spacesuit while in underwear inside a locker to escape an alien, the black goo and canister from Prometheus and Covenant, the hybrid of human and alien, the Prometheus engineer guy, water coming down in a storage bay while on a ship, the exploding ship time countdown, busy little creatures. Sure, why not just steal every line? I'm telling you, one fucking callback. That should be it. We need to band together and make this a reality. Clearly, this movie has hit a nerve with me. Granted, if I'm being honest, I really don't know what to do with the alien world anymore. It's all been done. I know it's hard to let go of this franchise because the aliens are such an iconic movie monster. But the monster itself doesn't have much left to explore. It's kind of like zombies at this point. I just feel like the aliens can't be the central villain in a film anymore. Like, they can be used as something akin to a natural disaster that the characters have to deal with while dealing with other things. But as a central villain, it just has lost all its mystery. Now, I give this movie props for doing a few things. One, for the way this movie looks and bringing back the danger level of the alien monster and keeping it mostly practical. I really think they made it stand out against something like Covenant that leaned into the CGI world. Two, the set and production design was excellent, and it really was shot beautifully. To be perfectly frank, I'm not a huge Fede Alvarez fan, but I really think that he did a great job in the behind the camera work on this movie. Everything is gorgeous in the right way. But good lord, this plot is just terrible with stupid moves left and right. Characters that might as well have no names and just be character 1, character 2, etc. And the sheer volume of nostalgia bait through this movie makes it such a frustrating watch. I'd give this movie a C-, but let me know what you think.